Yeah, we're just going to talk about Tottenham basically. How do you think we are at the moment? I mean, we're coming off the back of poor results, I would say. I mean, there has been some fight in the performances, mainly against Liverpool and Man United. But I mean, the 6-1 against Newcastle, what were your first thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I'd never predicted a 6-1 loss, but I did predict when I saw the lineup that we were going to get absolutely battered. And I said to the boys who we do our podcast with, that if we concede less than three, we've done an incredible. Because the lineup you picked wasn't fit for purpose. You can't have a back, certainly can't switch to a back four away at Newcastle for the first time in the season, effectively, and then play Perisic and Porro as fullbacks. You're just like, what is going on? In what world was this plan devised, and why did they think this was a good idea? So at that point, and I still feel this way to this point, to this moment. Sorry, I just feel numb. I don't feel anything really. When we conceded the fifth, I was sitting with my old man when we was watching it, and it was like none of us, we weren't reacting. We weren't going, oh no, Spurs, why are you doing this? It was like, it was just watching the inevitable unfold. And it was, that game was the final symptom of the fallout of Conte and obviously Stellini after him. It was coming. We played poorly all season, even though we found ourselves in a position where we could have qualified for the Champions League, could have gone third at one point. The football was, it was just terrible. It was awful. So by that point, I didn't really care. And when we went 3-0 against Liverpool, it's like the season's done. Let's get it over and done with. We need to rebuild massively. The sooner we get on with that, the better. And the final few games in the season are just we just got to fill them in. Really, we just got to do it and get it over and done with before we start to rebuild.
I mean, it's a similar reaction for me as well. I have flatmates that are Chelsea fans, and I think one's a Nottingham Forest fan who's even laughing at the goals that were conceded at the sixth. I mean, I had to join him in laughing. I didn't really know what else to do. I was completely numb.
Yeah, yeah. Which is is the way sometimes. Your brain saves you from the pain. If you were so deeply, imagine like there were some fans out there for sure who would have been impacted. But imagine if you've been able to watch that and absolutely feel every goal. Like after we were 4-0 down, you're like, well, what can I do? I can't let this affect me too much. Football fans and Spurs fans, especially, when things are going bad, they have an excellent ability to become stoical and the backs to the wall attitude. And I think that's where we are currently. It's like it's so bad. I know there has been a bounce back with Mason, but it's so bad that it's almost like, well, we're in this together now, and we just got to get on with it. But yeah, it was an awful game. Probably the worst performance I've ever seen from a Spurs team ever. I can't think, maybe Bayern Munich, the latter part of Pochettino's reign at Spurs. But yeah, that game against Newcastle was awful.
Well, I mean, what did you think of Stellini taking over in general?
I thought that it would. I can see why the club did it, because when Conte was away, we performed better. It was almost like without his influence in the dressing room, the players were able to relax. We got really big results against Chelsea, Man City, West Ham. Didn't concede at all, and things looked. While it was the same system, it felt like I said, without Conte there, it was relaxed, and so I can see why the club did it. Almost all of Conte's team stayed with Stellini at Spurs. So it's with a lot of hindsight that Spurs fans look at that appointment and go, "No, that was a massive mistake." It was a mistake, but it made complete sense at the time to me. Yeah, that's what I think. But it turned out to be even worse.
Yeah.
And against Newcastle, we became very desperate, and I think that's why he ended up playing that back four. But you can't do that when you only got two defenders. Yeah, so I saw the point in it, but it went wrong very quickly, and the club were right to get rid of him.
I mean, so that's now Conte, that's Mourinho, that's Pochettino now failing to find success at this club. What do you think the main problem is?
Well, Daniel Levy's the main problem. He's the guy who oversees he's made all those decisions. The sacking of Pochettino was different than Jose Mourinho and Conte. The reason why he was sacked was because we were unable to refresh the squad because we were building a stadium, having to play at Wembley. Brexit happened. Financial security was put at the forefront of the club's interests. And so we didn't buy players. And so that's what got Conte sacked. Then when we did buy the players to help rebuild Pochettino's squad, they bought Lo Celso and Ndombele for not insignificant sums of money, both complete flops. So all of that amounted to Pochettino having to be let go. I would have loved him back so that he could continue his journey now that things are different, but such is the way. It's not going to happen. So that's different from what's happened with Jose Mourinho. Again, with hindsight, when Jose Mourinho came in, I thought that makes sense to me. Born winner, massive coach, one of the biggest in the world. The fact that he'd even consider coming to Tottenham at that stage was surprising. Got him. Got that period of trying to find a manager 10 weeks, trying to find him, and then ending up with Nuno Espirito Santo, that failing within 3 months, and then getting Conte straight away. Again, I could see the attraction, the appeal. And then 18 months later, he left with the fan base hating him and club in disarray. But the point I'm making here is that there's one man overseeing all of these. And the decision making is Daniel Levy's, and the buck has to stop with Daniel Levy. If I've said this before on other podcasts, but if Daniel Levy was an employee of Daniel Levy, would he have fired him by now? And probably he would. He fires coaches for making bad mistakes. He's made bad mistake after bad mistake after bad mistake. And I get it, football is chaotic and it's hard to predict, and you've just got to try your best, what you believe to be best. But when the club is in the state it's in, it's not even in a state. It's just compared to the other teams around us, compared to the amount of money it costs to go to see Spurs, compared to the money we're spending. Every club around us has success, and we haven't. One trophy in 20 years, and that was a League Cup. It doesn't really count. So that when you say the club's in a mess, it's when you're comparing it to our rivals. We're not doing what they're doing, and we're paying season ticket prices that are comparable or more. So that's where the anger comes from. That, all right, look, you're asking us to pay for a premium product. You're asking us to pay huge amounts of money, but what you're delivering isn't that. And as we're treated by like clients, not like members, like the club belongs to us. In his own words, if you look at your membership card, it says client reference number on it. That's how they look at us, and that's fine. Whatever it is, I don't like it. It's the way football's gone. But if you're treating us like clients, then you got to give us what you're charging. You in return for what you're charging us, you have to give us a product that's worth the money, and that's not what we've had. And that's why there are people calling for his head, and that's why on Saturday rather, when we play, I'm not sure when this comes out, but Saturday when we play, there'll be more chance about him, and that protest will grow, and he has to be held accountable. There's nothing wrong with holding him accountable for his poor decisions. We're not talking about throwing stones at him. We're just saying you need to be aware of this and you need to make it better. And the pressure needs to be on you to make sure that the next decisions you're making are the correct ones, because you can't keep getting this wrong. Now, the problem is there's no consequence with Daniel Levy getting things wrong because he owns the football club. He owns something like 27% of ENIC. ENIC owns the football club. He's effectively the head of Tottenham Hotspur. Joe Louis is retired and old. So he's the guy. He owns it. He's the only way Daniel Levy leaves is if someone pays over the odds of what our club is actually worth. So if a Qatari consortium or an American consortium come in and say, Daniel Levy, how much do you want for Tottenham Hotspur? He might want 5 million. Market value of the club is 2 million. They have a commitment to spend as well. On top of that, it becomes extremely expensive for an owner to come in and buy. So while we will never force Daniel Levy out of a football club, because what you're asking for him, there are people out there that says Daniel Levy has to leave now. But to do that, he's going to have to accept an offer for $1 billion, $2 billion less than what he wants. So he thinks because you lot are campaigning, he's going to say, actually, do you know what? Forget that $2 billion. I'm not going to want it. That's just not the way it works. This isn't a case where you can make it so difficult that the trouble isn't worth it for him. That's what you might argue. Make his life difficult, and he just thinks, I can't be bothered. There's nothing you can do to make someone like an owner or someone who's excellent with money, and we've seen that with transfer market, the way he's managed Tottenham Hotspur in the past, and how he kind of does the best deal all the time. If he does that for players, selling players or buying players, what's he going to do it when it's his own money? He's going to be super meticulous, and he's not going to care about the dissenting voices until he gets what he thinks the club is worth to him, and all of the work he's done in building it up to this stage. So what you can do, though, is make it difficult for him. And that's what you saw against Manchester United when the guys inside the stadium were holding up banners and Levy out. He's noticing that. He won't like that. And he wants that to go away. That isn't a good look on TV when he's trying to do brand deals with NFL and build racetracks and talking to F1 and all that bullshit. He won't like the fact that his name is being brought into vain and those songs are being sung when he's trying to do, commercial moves. So carry on until it gets better, until he starts making the correct decisions.
I guess one thing that Manchester United, for example, had that we don't is the media coverage as well. They have Gary Neville campaigning basically on Sky against the owners, and I don't think there'll be anyone that will do that for Spurs. So
no,
it is essentially just the fans against the owner, really.
Yeah, you just got to create as much noise as you can so you get the press. We talk about it on the podcast. I don't agree with the way I think there's this group called Change for Tottenham, and the messaging is all over the place. The design is all over the place. There doesn't seem to be any kind of cohesive thought or plan. And while I get what they're doing, where they're coming from is a good place, you need, in order to run something like this and go up against the club, you need organization. You need people, copywriters, who can be able to put together a clear message. You need to produce a manifesto that's easily understood. And that's not what's happening. So that's the kind of main thing, the main group who claim to be, neither ENIC in or ENIC out, but they just want positive change for Tottenham, which is quite wishy-washy, but I can understand that. But then when we lose to a game, they're posting memes about Daniel Levy. You're like, well, you're undoing any good work you're doing by the way you're behaving. So this is the issue with that. And then you've got the sort of abrasive nature of ENIC out online, where if you even suggest something that might counter what they're saying, you get met with all kinds of abuse. So there needs a lot of work, a lot of communication needs to be watered down and not watered down. Sorry, it needs to be solidified and managed properly. There needs to be one spokesperson who makes all comments, who can talk to press. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we don't have Gary Neville, right? You need an organized group that will be able to get on the radar of people like Sky Sports, TalkSport. You remember? I don't know how old are you? 21. So you might remember when we were going to be moved to Stratford.
Yeah.
12. I don't know how long it was, about 10, 11 years ago. Yeah. And there was a group called Say No to, I can't remember what it was. Say Yes to N17, something like that. It was a long time ago. But they had one person, they had an idea, and it was very simple and easy to understand. This is what we want. This is what we demand. This is what is unacceptable. And they were on Sky Sports and they were on TalkSport. So it needs to be organised in that way. And do you know what? If the roles were reversed, it's not the same. The Glazers and Daniel Levy are not the same. They're not. You can't compare them. I know that there are people are talking about the green and gold until Man United is sold or something like that. And we've got something similar with purple and yellow or purple and gold. But what the Glazers did is took out huge loans or put the club in significant debt in order to buy it. That's not what Daniel Levy did. Daniel Levy has transformed Tottenham from I think it was bought for 250 or maybe 150 million pound. It was bought for, into a £2 billion club that's in top 10 in the Forbes rich list, top 5th actually richest clubs in terms of revenue, I think, in the world. And if you take away Man City because of how they've allegedly cooked their books, then we're 4th. That is the issue isn't what that you cannot compare what the Glazers did with Daniel Levy. They're not the same. The only similarity between the two is that they own football clubs. They take money out of Manchester United. Daniel Levy has never taken a penny out of Tottenham other than his wages, right? Not to he's never been paying dividends ever. So they're very, very different. And Gary Neville, if he was a Spurs fan, would not be campaigning or talking about Daniel Levy in the way he talks about the Glazers. So the cheerleader we need won't exist because it's debatable and subjective whether or not you think Daniel Levy has done a good job. I'm of the opinion now that he needs to go move and sell the club to someone else who's going to be much more ambitious and aggressive in order to compete with Manchester United, City, and all the rest of them. But that's not universally accepted. There are people who think he is the man for the job. But there's no Man United fans out there going, yeah, we want to keep the Glazers. At Spurs, while the groundswell towards Daniel Levy is growing, towards his removal is growing, there are still many Spurs fans out there who think he's fine. He's doing a good job. So it's different from Glazers, different situation completely, and you can't compare them, which is another problem with this purple and gold thing. Purple and gold until Tottenham are sold, something like that. So, and just the reason why I know that there are Spurs fans out there that are backing Levy is because we just ran a simple poll on Twitter saying, look, without any, I know that we understand there's nuances to this debate, but are you Levy in or Levy out? And 1 in 4 were Levy in. That's 1 in 4. That's a quarter of the stadium. That is not insignificant. So it's not the same as Daniel. It's not the same as the Glazer situation.
I guess what goes against that case is the fact that you can't really argue that he's a very good businessman. He's taken the club forward in terms of facilities and brand in general. So, I mean, that'll go against the protesters. But it's just, for me, it's just a lack of, I guess, interest in the football side of things. Do you think it could be worth keeping him at the club and bringing in someone else to do that job?
I think if you think his job is merely, or not merely, because it's important in modern football to be able to generate revenue, because if you're not generating that revenue, you can't spend the money. You have, in order to be compliant with FFP, you can only spend a certain percentage of your revenue, or above it by a certain percentage, right? So you might say, I don't give a shit about F1, I don't care about the NFL, I don't care about any of that. I just want some rich people to come in and buy all the players. You need that commercial activity in order to be able to spend in the transfer market. They go hand in hand. It's why Bournemouth could be bought by, or even Newcastle. They have unfathomable wealth. And back in the old days, they would have bought everybody, but they can't because their revenues are only X. So, to answer your question, I think the idea of allowing Daniel Levy just to take hold of the commercial aspect to the club and generate as much revenue as possible and increase the value of the club, then why not? Who's better? I think a perfect combination would be for him to stay and do that stuff, and then you have a part of ENIC is sold to, or part of the club is sold to new investors whose interest is what's going on the pitch. I don't know how that would work though, because will his ego allow it? Will he give up that much power just so he can work, or stay on as chairman? To some degree, I think he's already moving in that direction as well by the hiring of Scott Munn. I don't know much about him. I don't know if he's going to guarantee any kind of success on the pitch. But with the hiring of sort of Paratici and Scott Munn, it did feel like there was a move from Daniel Levy to step back from the football, but I don't think he's able to in its entirety. His removal in its entirety, because he's obsessed with detail and he wants to be across things, and the most exciting thing about Tottenham is the football. So I don't know if he'd be able to let go. But yeah, he does his job well as in terms of the business for sure. Yeah, he's probably the best in the league at it.
So going more on to sort of the football side of things and the team, we have spent, but I mean the question is, have we spent enough as the other big teams around? Would you say it's down to a lack of investment, or would you just say it's poor recruiting?
You can't claim that we haven't spent in the last couple of transfer windows. So the money we're spending wasn't insignificant. £60 million. The answer is poor recruitment. That's the answer. And again, that goes back to Daniel Levy. It doesn't matter how much you're spending. If you're bringing in the wrong type of players, then it has to go back to the top. Make the right decisions, employ the right people to get the right people in. I think he did a good job with Paratici. There are some Spurs fans out there that aren't crying any tears for him leaving, but I think he did a good. He's kind of done a net positive in terms of transfers. But you look at Sanchez, 40 million. I know it was a while back, but Lo Celso, 40, whatever it was, and Ndombele obviously 60 million. That is naturally going to have an impact on your future budgets and what you can do. To have those on our wage bill would impact what we can do going forward. But yeah, by and large, for the amount of money we've spent, you haven't seen the return. Although we were talking on the podcast yesterday, and I'm not sure that. I think we don't know how good this squad is. We don't know how good they can potentially be because the football under Conte and the system that he had them playing didn't get the best out of some of our better players. So, if you look at the depth in the squad, you've got a midfield of Bissouma, who was class at Brighton. It's shocking the season he's had. You've got Bentancur, you've got Højbjerg, Skip, and Sarr. That's not a bad midfield. We need an attacking midfielder in there. Someone like Maddison would be a dream. And then you've got fullbacks of Spence, Porro. You've got Adogi's coming in from Udinese, who's had a great season. Ben Davies, Reguilon could come back off loan. Perisic can play there as well. So there's depth. And then up top, obviously, naturally, we've got the four strikers. Obviously, the biggest problem is defence and keeper. We need to spend about £150 million fixing that defence. I swear to God, if I have to see Davinson Sanchez, Dyer, and Davies in the same team again, I'll scream. That is negligence in the most extreme. The fact that they got us kicked out of a cup again, or Tanganga, none of them are good enough. None of them are. There isn't a team in the top 10 in the Premier League that would take any of those. No one is buying Eric Dyer. No one is. It would. Tanganga might get a championship team. He's championship level. The fact that we are still starting him in this season, or any of them 6 years afterwards, like Dyer's a great servant and a great guy, and he's obviously a leader and good to have around the club, but he is fundamentally not good enough. And the fact that he's played practically every minute this season is shocking. So yeah, a lot of work to be done.
And yeah, going based off your previous point, I spoke to a lot of neutrals, and they would say on paper we have a very strong team. So we just need someone to, I guess,
going forward, fine.
Yeah. So I mean, who would be your choice as next manager?
I mean, I don't even want to say it anymore because it looks like he's going to Chelsea, but obviously Pochettino. I like, given the fact the upset and the commotion around the club and the feeling towards Daniel Levy, how he didn't just go, I know what will fix everything, bring back Pochettino, the fans will love it. He'll finally have some money to spend, we'll carry on that journey. It at least gives, even if it fails and falls on his face, it gives Levy like 6 months respite to plan for the future. But he didn't decide not to go to it. And to credit, like, if he doesn't believe it's the right thing and the right manager, and they've gone through this due diligence process to find the right manager, then there is thought and planning going into it, and maybe Pochettino isn't the one, and I'm too romantic about it. But I thought that was like a gimme. He was like right there. He doesn't have a job. There's no compensation. He loves the club. We've had a previous relationship. It makes everybody happy. It seemed mental that we didn't at least interview him or approach him. So to answer your question, I think the only possible answer is Nagelsmann, but that is not without risk. His age is an issue. Apparently has a massive ego. He's got to make sure that he has a relationship with Harry Kane that's really positive. Nagelsmann, I like the idea of company as well. Right, the way he sort of holds himself and the way he conducts himself in interviews. And obviously he's, I've got a mate of mine, James Alcott, he's a QPR fan. He watches Championship football, and he said this Burnley team is one of the best teams he's ever seen in the Championship. Not that directly correlates to why he should get a Spurs job, but I like the company, and I think he's going to have a big career, and it's a shame that it didn't start in earnest at Tottenham. But yeah, I think Nagelsmann seems like the obvious. I don't care who it is, as long as it's attractive football and there's a project that's going to last 4 years and that we're going to commit to it. And in 18 months, we're not going to be in the exact same situation. The best thing about the Pochettino era was that it was a slow plodding towards an idea that took 18 months to fully come to fruition. And then when we got there, it was great. And even the journey to that point where we were, you know, Rose and Walker were flying, and Kane and Son and Dele were, and Ericsson were just floating around the pitch, and it was fluid and sexy. And it wasn't like that at the beginning. And lots of change had to happen, but everyone was on board to have a unified fan base where everybody is moving in the right direction and we believe in the way the club's playing would be a wonderful, wonderful thing again, because it's been so divisive and frustrating over the last 3 years. To have that back, and you know, all of this stuff is all compounded by how well Arsenal are doing and how they feel about their football club. And we're looking at Arsenal going, why can't we have that? They haven't, you know, they've spent significantly, and that seems to be going under the radar, is that they've spent, you know, over 330 million pound or thereabouts. They haven't sold a single player in 2 transfer windows. It's like, well, at some point they're going to have to balance their books. But that speculation is aggressive. And they brought in a manager. They trusted him after 2 eighth place finishes, then 2 5th place, and now look at them. They're the title challenge. So, you know, the fans need to show some sort of loyalty to the project as well. But yeah, that you're looking at what they're doing, and how much they're enjoying their club, and we absolutely excuse my French. We had the hate following Spurs at the moment for a lot of fans. Yeah, it's compounded by what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you said about Pochettino. It almost seemed like he was just waiting, ready to get the call from Levy, but he just never did. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Pochettino at the end of his time at Spurs. He came out with a press conference and he said that he doesn't really feel like the manager. He just feels like the first team coach. And that is probably easy for Levy to walk over him. So I'm just making that case of if it was right for him to come back. I think someone with a backbone probably is important, like you mentioned, Nagelsmann, but then there's many barriers to that as well. So yeah, if we can just get a manager that we can trust, because I mean, not to talk too much about Arsenal, but Arteta finishing 8th place twice, I think a lot of clubs would have probably sacked him at that point, but they kept him there. So I'm not sure if this club will be willing to keep a manager there with the bad results and the bad finishes.
What I would say is that they courted Arteta for a long time, and they had a plan in place, and then maybe I mean, who knows? It's all conjecture. We have no idea. But maybe they thought, well, if this takes 2 years, if we see progress, then we can kind of stick with it. Yeah, but you're right. I'm not sure he would. Look, their fans. Let's not forget their fans calling for his head several times. There were T-shirts printed, Arteta out T-shirt. So let's not think that their fans showed them any kind of loyalty. They didn't. But the club certainly did, and they knew what they wanted. And Edu, their director of football, he knew what he wanted, and they started putting the pieces together and the players in order to create what they have achieved this season. And that kind of foresight and foreplanning is exactly what we need at Tottenham. We don't want another manager being sacked in 18 months. I can't keep going on this merry-go-round. I mean, the one positive that the manager has is that the fans feel probably this is in terms of how optimistic they feel. It hasn't been as low as it is now since Sherwood was in charge. So the new manager coming in kind of has a fresh slate to just go. We're looking for any kind of positivity, any kind of improvement, and when we see it, it'll feel good. But yeah, I don't know.
One of the main attractions for the next manager will be Harry Kane, but obviously with his contract being run down, would you use this summer to cash in on him?
I think if he's not going to sign, we have to sell him. There's a risk. You could gamble potentially that you can wait and say, well, we're not selling you. You can run your contract down, and that we get the managerial appointment correct. We invest in the transfer market, and then he sees some massive improvement in Spurs next year and goes, let's start talking about contracts. You can do that. You can risk. But if you sell him in January, you get a quarter of his value. So there's that risk. I think, can Daniel Levy's reputation take selling Kane in the summer? But he's if he doesn't sign a contract, he's going to go anyway, and we're going to have to spend £100 million or thereabouts to replace him. Not that we would do that, but that's how much a replacement for Harry Kane might cost. Osimhen, what's he going to cost from Napoli? Probably 100 million. So if you sell him, you have the money to replace him. If you lose him, you don't. The hard decision, but the correct one would be if he's adamant he's not going to sign a new contract, then you sell him, and then you have control over where he goes. If he leaves at the end of the contract and Pochettino's at Chelsea and goes, come play with me, Harry. He loves Pochettino. Goes to Chelsea. What would that do for his reputation?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the main concerns in everyone's minds at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, there are many teams out there that do very well without Harry Kane, and Spurs will be fine eventually without him. But the transition on top of everything else that is happening at this club at the moment, is something we could do without. But good players come to the end of their contracts. This is something we have to deal with elsewhere. Everyone else is dealing with it as well. So we've had him for a very, very, very long time. And you know what? Looking at the state the club's in, the lack of ownership and the lack of manager and the lack of director of football and the kind of rudderless operation, what's he got to stay for? Why is he He's looking around it, going, what do you want from me? I'm doing my bit. I'm bagging goals every season. I've scored more goals than anyone else. What are you lot doing? What are you doing, Daniel Levy, to convince me to stay? Right now, we don't even have a manager. I'm as old as the manager that he's managing me, and Ryan Mason. That may be a way to keep him. I just go, do you want to coach? Come on, coach. Do you want to have a say in things like Mbappe at PSG? I don't know, man. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, so would you say this is a rebuild that we need, or do we have the players and structure in place? We just need someone to, I don't know, maybe just take it to the final stages like we thought Conte and Mourinho would have done.
I mean, look, no, I mean, we need a brand new defense and a goalkeeper, and that's sort of a third of the team. So yeah, no, this is rebuilding now, but we have talent in our squad, and we have talent out on loan, and the right manager could get a lot more from this team than we have seen over the last couple of years. So yeah, I mean, but there's no other club going out there in the summer with as much work to do as Spurs. So a new manager with the right ideas, who's looking at the players that we have to get the best out of them, but knows that we need investment in our defence massively, because the team isn't bad. We've seen against Liverpool what we can do going forward. We just cannot defend, and there's no point. If you can't defend, there's 0 point to any of this. We need to sort out our defence. They're just not good enough. They're not at the level. And so yeah, that is in part transition, but in part rebuild, and then a manager who thinks that he can do better than Conte and Jose Mourinho, and Nagelsmann no doubt probably does. And that's the attraction at Spurs, I think, for someone like Nagelsmann is, what if I can do what they couldn't? No one can win at Spurs. What if I manage it? What does that do for his reputation? Again, we were saying on the podcast, is if he wins at Spurs, any job in the world is his for him. He could just handpick. And even if he doesn't, it's just like, well, at Spurs, it's not going to happen. It's fine. You'll get another job anywhere. So I think it's a no-brainer for Nagelsmann to come.
I guess that all depends on Levy again, really, doesn't it? I mean, thank you very much for joining me on this. I really appreciate you talking to me. I mean, we could go on hours about Tottenham, essentially, couldn't we? The real question is, are you going to be going go-karting?
No. Out of principle, no, I'm not going to be going go-karting.
I mean, I'm not sure many people would.
It's just feature, isn't it? It's a thing to do. People come for that. They go the Beyonce concerts. It becomes an entertainment venue rather than just he's building stuff around Tottenham that makes it a 7-day multi-purpose place. So people will travel to go-karting under the Spurs Stadium on a Wednesday where nothing else is happening in Tottenham, or Tuesday afternoon, or whatever it might be. That's what he's trying to do, and I can understand it. It's just that it just feels like the focus isn't on the first team and it is on these commercial enterprise.
Yeah, essentially. Well, yeah, thank you very much for for speaking to me.